and welcome back to another episode of Colivers Club. In this episode, we're going to talk with Greene. She has been a nomad for more than 10 years. She even met her partner as a nomad. And she has been working for different companies to promote remote work. She's a remote work advocate.
Yep, I met Ali in Coliving 3 years ago, more or less. And we also have met in Javi and other places. And yeah, she's like a super kind person, super interesting. And she's also helping us now with the Colivers Club community. And she's doing an amazing job on it. So I hope you guys enjoy it.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Colivers Club. Here I am with Ali Greene.
Hey,
Hello, Ali.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. Ali has been a remote worker advocate and speaker for nearly a decade. And she's originally from HR background, but she transitioned more into human experience design and also how to help companies and individuals thrive on the remote, with a remote setting, let's say. And you also wrote a book about it.
Yeah.
What's the name?
Remote Works, Managing for Freedom, Flexibility, and Focus. And I think all the co-livers can appreciate the freedom part.
Yeah. So does remote work?
I think there's no turning back now.
Absolutely. How do you first started with a co-living experience? Because after nearly a decade of traveling, you've been to plenty of co-livings, right?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. I think that I have a classical sort of like backpacker introduction to digital nomad life. So I quit my job in New York City, which for Americans is like you make it when you make it in New York. But I was like, nah, this lifestyle isn't for me. 2014, I was still, 10 years younger than I am now. And so I felt like I had a lot of life ahead of me. And I was like, well, I'm only going to leave this experience to have an equally awesome new experience. And immediately I thought, I want to experience more traveling. I want to get out of my home country, see different cultures, and figure it out like on my own and what it feels like to travel solo. And of course, the obvious thing at that time was not jumping into digital nomad life, but it was going to hostels and meeting other people and meeting community there. It just so happened when I left my job in 2014, I didn't fully quit. I was in the process of transitioning to more of a consultant role, but I no longer needed to be in New York City. And so while I was, backpacking, I realized like, oh, I don't have to put this conversation fully on pause till I get back to the United States. Like, there's Wi-Fi here. I can check in, email, start to scope out like what this future might look like. And that was my first taste of balancing having fun and socializing and being in this community atmosphere with like opening up my laptop and having a moment of being serious. And then in fact, like I actually met someone while I was backpacking at a bar randomly who had told me that this person was a UX designer and traveled full time and just did their work online. And it was the first time, I don't know if we used digital nomad in that conversation, but it was the first time, 2014, that I realized this is possible. I didn't, fully dive into the lifestyle. I like tipped my toes in the water, you might say. But it was really interesting to reflect back now and see, while there weren't sort of like an economy or an ecosystem specifically for nomads at that time, there were aspects of what we look for in co-living today. So community, strong Wi-Fi, finding creative inspiration through travel. And I thought that was really inspiring. It took me a few years, I would say co-living adjacent experiences to finally dive into my first co-living, but it's been a long journey.
And how was the very first experience in the co-living? Do you think it was like, wow, I will never go back to hostels? Or you might think, oh, I like this for a while, but then I can switch to other kind of accommodation?
Yeah, so my first like digital nomad community experience was not a true co-living. It was a pop-up. And so it was an organization that no longer exists that got a group of 12 people together, had a co-working space for us to use, and we shared apartments. And it was not a great experience, actually. I learned a lot from that experience in terms of you can't just throw a bunch of remote workers together and have them share an apartment and expect them to bond.
How? how is not possible?
Like that. So I think that's the first mistake that a lot of people think of when they think of remote work, digital nomads, co-livings. It's like, okay, if other people are living this lifestyle, I must immediately have enough values or interests to connect with them. And this, in fact, wasn't the case. We shared apartments, but it definitely felt more like traditional roommates than the sort of untangible feeling you get when you're in a co-living environment, which I'm sure we're going to get to. And so this experience was, oh gosh, maybe it was back in 2016. And then I did a similar travel program, again, same setup, like housing provided for us, shared housing, a workspace. It wasn't all housed in one building like some of the co-livings we see today, and it was a pop-up. But this time I had a fantastic experience. It's one of my like favorite experiences so far. I met my co-author there and had lifelong friends like from that point. And the difference in that experience versus the first one was the focus on community. There are specific events that were, held in our schedule and our calendar to make sure that people were intentionally coming together. So things that we see in a lot of, of the amazing co-livings today, like having a Skillshare night, having, some sort of family meal to get together and start the week. And so I realized, okay, I'm into this. This is cool. Like, I like this. I want to do more of this. And my first like kind of digital nomad co-living, true co-living, if you will, then was Sun & Co. It actually took me a year to get there from the time I first found out about them to showing up at their door, because I was emailing back and forth and asking a lot of questions to ensure that this co-living experience would be more like my second digital nomad experience I had with the community, not my first. And I think for people that are testing out this lifestyle or interested into going to co-livings, it's important to know how to ask those questions, whether you're asking them to yourselves and reading the website to make sure it's a good fit. Because for me, I've now experienced a handful of really amazing places, a handful of places that I wish were different, and that sort of helped me shape my view and my perspective on why education around what we consider true co-living is very important.
Yeah, and if you need a platform that curates co-livings, you should check out Mapmelon. It's the sponsor of this podcast. So yeah, in this website you can find really the community-based co-livings, because to me the co-living word has been a little bit misused sometimes. So to me, it's very important that there's a community and there's facilitators and there's these events and traditions. So yeah, check out my melons. Okay, that's check.
Are you a remote worker or digital nomad looking for the perfect co-living experience? Meet Mapmelon, your all-in-one platform for booking community-focused co-livings with exclusive deals and promotions. With co-livings all around the world, Mapmelon offers a lot of options for every budget and lifestyle. You can also track your friends' plans and share your own, and never miss out on an opportunity to reconnect. And finally, you can also stay up to date with the latest events, workshops, and job opportunities in the co-living community. So sign up today, discover your next co-living, and join a global network of Colivers.
But absolutely, I think I think co-living should have somebody that offers or facilitates family meetings, family dinners, and these other events. And I think that's how people can bond. But we also were talking these days about how you can have a balance between extrovertedness and introvertedness, because you identify yourself as an introvert, right?
Yeah, I would say it's funny, like how I explain myself when I join co-living communities is that I started out really strong out of the gate and I have a lot of social energy and I'm excited to be here, and I come in with that energy and then I slowly retreat back to, my own personal needs, which is to have some alone time, smaller groups, taking, a break from the more like loud and energetic vibes. So like in that sense, like I do find myself to be quite introverted in the way that while I'm very social, like I love to be around community, I do find myself prioritizing my alone time, which can be a delicate balance in a co-living.
Absolutely, because there's so many things going on, and you might also have some FOMO of, oh, yeah, I need some alone time, but I also want to do this other activity. So I'm wondering how can co-livings accommodate introverts and also introspectiveness, because to me as an extrovert, I love going dancing and doing all of these group activities, but I also like board games and these times where we can connect one-on-one or in these small settings. So do you have...
And thank you for being a board game leader last week as well. That was really great.
Oh yeah, we need to play more board games. I want to play Citadels. And also Secret Code, right?
Yeah, code names.
Codenames,
Codenames. Let's do it. But it's exactly as what you're saying. There's like variety that needs to happen in the programming. If you're, just having, dance parties every night, while that can be very fun and like you physically get energy from that, it's not inclusive to all of the different personalities that might exist in the group. I would say there's, in a way, when I think of building intentional community, I really think through let me try to put this in 3 buckets. So like the first is the curation of the community itself. And what that looks like in a co-living is being very authentic to what the pros and the cons are of joining a co-living in a specific location, whether it's in your marketing communication, your website, how you're presenting yourself to potential future guests. I think that's incredibly important so that people can self-curate and want to join a place that meets their expectations. And what I mean by that is if you're a rural co-living location and it's going to be really hard to get around without a car, or you're going to have to rely on someone for grocery shopping and your basic needs, to present that up front in your communication so people can say, am I actually in the right space, in the right mood to be somewhere that's a little bit off the beaten path? It might be more of a challenge to just go off and do my own thing if I need alone time. How does that impact me as a more introverted person who values alone time? Or how does that impact me as an extrovert who, like, you're in a rural area, it's super relaxing, there's social activities to be had with the group, but maybe you can't just like pop down for like bars and like clubs in the city vibe. And so one, like curate your community, be really authentic about what you offer and clearly what you don't offer. I think Chateau Co-Living does a really great job of that in their website. I think they specifically say this is like what this is for, this is what this is not for. And I really like that model. In my own retreats, we did what's good, what's challenging, and what is interesting to folks, and broke it down in those categories. The second bucket for intentional community in a way that caters to both introverts and extroverts is having shared experiences through the group. And I think those shared experiences can be things that sometimes do become more introverted. And so you talk about not just like smaller groups or calmer vibes, but also introspection. And maybe it's things like having an activity where there's space for some like journaling and sharing, or board game nights, or just having smaller group dinners and not always the big family dinners.
I like that idea a lot.
So I have this concept called dinner roulette.
Okay.
I used to do this actually for company offsites, but company offsites and co-livings have some similarities there. And basically, you can either do it at random, or if you're feeling a little mischievous, you can do it kind of someone is the lead that pairs people up in groups of 4, maybe 4 people that really haven't bonded or interacted much in the co-living. And everybody at the same time on the same day goes out to, let's say if there's, a co-living house of 8 people, you would go to 2 different restaurants. If it's 12 people, you might go to 3 different restaurants. So you keep these groups of 4, and everybody has their own dinner just in a group of 4, so introverts can feel more empowered to like talk and really get to know people. The conversation goes deeper, and then you can all meet up at a bar afterwards and talk about your experience and hang out in the larger group. And that's a perfect example of something that's focused for introverts and extroverts, because there's optionality in how you participate. I also think variety is just really great. You already mentioned, like going out for a hike is quite different of an experience and will naturally draw people that want to be outdoorsy to maybe like going to a, like kind of escape room or something like that. And so I think just letting the community make those choices in a democratic way is a really great way to see what the vibe is for the co-living community. So I'd say, like, to summarize this, because I tend to be lengthy, like inclusivity of the different types of activities available, optionality on if people participate or not, and make it very like a safe space to say, nah, I'm not interested, or like that's not my thing, or I need some alone time that night. And having that not mean that they're shunned from the group, but in fact the next day like everyone reconnects. And offering small group options, so not everything is always everyone together.
Wow, amazing. I really like the idea of the dinner roulette. It sounds so fun.
Yeah, maybe
Because
we still have time to try it
I
here.
think so, yeah. We can totally, maybe for Friday even. Oh, because now here we are in Burgas Coliving
Yeah,
in
amazing.
Bulgaria. It's an amazing coliving. You should definitely come here and check it out. And yeah, I think there's a good balance here of extroverted activities and more introspective. And introverted, for example, we have crafts and arts.
Yeah, the arts and crafts night I love.
Oh, I love it too.
So
It also gets you out of your comfort zone maybe a little bit, because making art, or even if you don't paint or do anything, sitting down and doing it with the group makes you, at least that's how I felt last time, because I like art and I do sometimes calligraphy and miniature painting, but it was like, oh, I want to do aquarella, and I was seeing other people, so I felt also inspired. So yeah, I really like the variety of activities, and whenever I go to a co-living, joining an activity that I never expected to do, to me that's the most rewarding.
yeah, I agree.
Absolutely. And you also co-authored a book.
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about this book and how was your writing process?
Yeah, definitely. So my co-author and I met in Cape Town at this, I would consider it to be a pop-up co-living or digital nomad program. Back in 2017, the end of the year 2017, we were in Cape Town, and we both had full-time jobs at fully remote companies when we were there, and became friends, and we planned a few retreats for nomads and nomad curious people in the following years, and that really built not only our friendship but the idea that we could work on creative projects together. And then I don't like to say, the big C word, but then COVID came around, and I feel like everybody has like a COVID story. Like this industry really just also got like super well known because people after lockdowns felt this reemergence of travel. But during COVID was particularly interesting. A few weeks before all of the lockdowns, I stepped down from my full-time role and wanted to just like take a break, like, think about what I wanted for my future. And within like 1 week of time, I realized that a lot of companies were really scared and panicking about how to make remote work for them. And I got really angry, and that emotion was very strong. And I felt that my prediction of what was going to happen was, if companies were using the COVID years as a time to test their remote work capabilities, that remote work would become a scapegoat and people wouldn't be allowed to have the freedom to be location independent. And for me, like being a digital nomad totally changed my life. Like I met my boyfriend while I was been traveling. I now have a base in a different country that's not where I'm from. I've made many close friends through this. I've really been able to like find my authentic voice because I've been nomading. And I felt like, how could we, this is one very privileged way of living, but how could we take this option away from people just because companies are really bad at remote work?
Yeah, and also like we have this global pandemic and this super unrealistic thing happening, and so yeah, let's do remote work in this in a rush,
Yeah,
without
like
really
really
thinking
stressful.
about it, like and then it doesn't work. Well, obviously it doesn't work. You didn't have the time to think about the strategy and all of this, and then you are using like an scapegoat. It doesn't. Let's go back
So
to the
everyone
office.
go back to the office. You're not allowed to travel, et cetera, et cetera. And we have seen some of that. Like, the rise of hybrid is a different topic for a different day. But this was my inspiration of how can I help. The way I thought it could make a difference was, how can I help companies get better at remote work so that people, if they're interested in the lifestyle I live, could opt into that lifestyle. Or if they're not interested, like my co-author who had been nomadic decided to settle down in a town in the US, and travel was a piece of her life that was coming to an end while we were writing the book, but we were still collaborating and writing the book remotely. And so
That's also an interesting topic.
the point of all of this is that being location independent, digital nomad, whatever you want to say, is about having like the full choice of how you live your life. And for me, it meant like more travel. For her, it meant settling down and creating community in one spot. Both of us were getting our needs met, and that's why both of us wanted to write this book. And so while the focus isn't on the nomad community, it's nomad adjacent in the way that it gives tips and strategies and reflection questions to how you can be a better remote worker, whether an employee on a team or with your clients, and how you manage those client relationships so that you can travel more frequently without them, you know, asking for calls at like midnight local time when they're unneeded. Like, just what are the processes to make work more enjoyable for
It could
everybody?
have been an email, you know?
Yeah.
Like, why?
The classic.
Come
This could have been
on.
an email
Uh,
situation.
Yeah, I think, and also you're offering these kind of services now, right? We were talking about it yesterday. The strategies of async communication, which in this world is super required.
Yeah, I think asynchronous communication, documentation, for a lot of companies that either want to hire digital nomads, and I have a whole like piece around why digital nomads have like stronger, maybe not stronger, but like a strong skill set to be able to work remotely and be creative and add value to your organization. But then I meet people like in our co-living right now specifically that have very strict sort of hours of when they need to be on. And so yes, there's location freedom, but I think as companies improve documentation, asynchronous communication, project management, we'll start seeing more time flexibility and time freedom as well. And I think that's the next level of remote work, which can lead to more interesting nomadic lives in terms of being able to travel further distances, being able to, you know, visit family members in different countries if you come from that type of family background. I know for me, like going back to the US, I want to go for a while and soak it in. But if I'm working exclusively with, you know, European clients, then it means I'm getting up super early every day and I don't have the time to like spend with my family. And so you really, I think we'll become more time agnostic in the future, and that'll lead to more opportunities for traveling.
Yeah, because also like companies can tap into this world possibility, like people, they can hire people all around the world, and there's no limit to talent.
Yeah.
So that's also amazing. And I wanted to ask you also about what does writing mean to you?
Yeah, I love this. So before I wrote the book, I thought I hated to write. I'm someone who wrote a lot in my role as a remote worker. We were a very asynchronous, heavy company, and so I wrote because it was how I needed to express myself, but I often found that having chats or drawing pictures or other creative means of communication was something I really enjoyed. And so the call for writing came, you know, I remember the day, it was like the day they announced the lockdown. I was at a ski resort in the Alps. I was supposed to learn how to ski. Instead, I just opened up my laptop and like poured my heart out on this, like, I need to go back and read it. Maybe I won't even be like super impressed anymore, but this article about how people are thinking about remote work the wrong way. And I felt in that moment, I learned writing is the ultimate way to express yourself, and just like get it out of your system and pass things along that can be learning moments for people without it needing to take up more of your time and feeling like a burden on yourself. And so, you know, again, like linking that back to a digital nomad lifestyle, it's really empowering to be able to write and share information and connect with people through your writing without having to be on Zoom calls and maintaining your network and maintaining your connections all the time, because that takes you away from the in real life experience of being among other people in a co-living if you're constantly, you know, on your computer when that information can be shared in other formats like writing. And so for me, it became a powerful tool to express myself and to connect with others.
Oh, beautiful answer. Yeah, this reminds me that we have also a Skillshare about book writing hosted by you Thursday.
Yeah.
I cannot wait to attend to it. And also that's the cool thing about co-livings that provide these activities, the skill sharing, I really love. And I think that's one of the things that I enjoy the most because again, I learn so many things and I get to share these moments with people that are passionate about, for example, writing.
Yeah.
And I get
Bachata.
bachata, of course. That's amazing. Um, I wanted also to ask you about your partner because you guys met in a co-living.
Yes, we did. Shout out Sun and Co. I think there's a handful of couples that have come out of the years spent there. It was really interesting, I think, to meet someone in a co-living environment. Sometimes I hear from time to time the conversation of nomadic relationships come up, and are people looking for the same thing, and how do you connect with someone? And there's all these questions about kind of the logistics of that lifestyle. But I think what's important to remember when you're in a co-living, you can't like hide your true self. Like
Ooh.
we wake up and we want to get our morning coffee and shuffle downstairs, and like this is our home, and home is meant to be a place where like you can get back to yourself, and you're not trying to like be cool or like, you know, have this persona of like I'm ready to be dateable. Like you can't fake it.
Yeah, you can hold it for a week together, but no more than that. And then like, yeah, yeah.
Sees you like first thing in the morning, pre-coffee. If someone sees you, you know, like after a particularly stressful work day and you're in a bad mood and you're trying to find a healthy way to blow off steam, if someone sees you super sweaty, like at a group workout, like there's only so long you can have this different persona. And I think that's really amazing when it comes to dating, because you get to know the authentic person faster and say like, is this someone who I connect with at like an intellectual level, at an emotional level? Like, do we want to, you know, take it to that physical level? Like, what does it mean to care for someone, to be in love, to show your true self? And there's so many like in modern dating, otherwise, like kind of games people might play, or like trying to like project this image of themselves that maybe they feel more confident in. But eventually, to have a meaningful relationship, you need to be yourself and see if your true self and the other person's true self is compatible. And so like I think, you know, just like when I'm super disheveled and go for my coffee, and that's like how I met my partner. I actually was sick. I had a cold and like went down to get some tea and like was like, I'm not talking to anybody. See you next week, you know? And we built a friendship first, and it was months before we elevated it to the next level. And I think there's just something so like pure and genuine about that.
Yeah, and also very intense because if you think about it, it's like you're having continuous dates, like and all the activities and everything. You really get to. I feel like you compress maybe 3 months of dating in just 1 week.
It's like dog years. Like friendships get accelerated, romantic relationships get accelerated. Like you really go through the stages of life with people faster.
Absolutely, and also growth, right? Because I think co-living offers you this, and also traveling. This offers this space where you are out of your comfort zone, but you are out of your comfort zone together.
Yeah.
So you feel like you belong to a bigger thing, and then it also empowers you, and to me also that's amazing. But that means also that there's some challenges.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you, what are the main challenges of nomadic relationships?
Yeah, so I mean, like I can start with some logistical ones first because I'm just such a logistics brain person. Having a 2-passport relationship can be really tricky because there's different visa requirements, there's different abilities to travel, there's different places that you call home that you want to spend time in. And so just navigating, how do you spend time traveling together, traveling alone, traveling considering the visa and compliance issues. It can be a lot of things to think about.
Schengen-based relationships.
Yeah, basically. It's a lot to think about. It's a lot to plan in order to, you know, plan travel. Like maybe you plan months in the future because, you know, if you run out of days and you have to be out of a country for months, it makes the conversation of relationships a little interesting because it's like, well, are we ready to plan that far in the future? Like, what does that look like for us? And it's just the logistical headaches. It's not super like glamorous or fun to be in your relationship always talking about like, what co-living do we go to next? Do we want some alone time next? What country do we want to go to? Like, it's a lot of planning.
But there's also a lot of intentionality.
Yeah.
Right? So
Yeah.
I think that makes it interesting that, oh, yeah, we need to plan together and we don't take it for granted. If we want this to work,
Yeah.
we need to put it in the work.
It can't just be like, oh, yeah.
Let's meet tomorrow.
Yeah. So I think with every challenge, as you said, like, it comes with this like added benefit of like, well, the challenge is you have to think about all these things. The benefit is it forces you to think about these
Yeah.
things. So it's a lot more intentional. I also think some of the challenges arise around like how to make decisions and spend your time. And finding, especially in a co-living environment, finding balance where you want to be, I mean, I can speak for my relationship. We want to be seen as individual people amongst this group and have people get to know like Allie, not the couple, you know? And so I think it's finding an independent way to be part of the group and connect with the family community aspect of things. For me as an introverted person to have some alone time and just do things by myself, for us as a couple to take time away from the group to, you know, be in our relationship. And so in a co-living environment, it is challenging because you want to participate in everything, and also you have work to do, and also you need to think of these 3 layers of getting your personal needs met alone, in the relationship, and in the community. Again, though, benefit, like intentionality. And so that's something, you know, like when I think about how I plan my week, it's what group activities do I want to go to? Which ones are the same as my partner? When are we going to, you know, plan for us like a special little date? Last week we went to the city by ourselves for a few hours away from the group. And how do we each have our own alone time as well? So
Absolutely. And I think also you need to differentiate between the co-living aspect of the relationship, or when you meet somebody in a co-living, you need to, oh, maybe I see this person in another light because we are in a co-living in this idyllic space, but then maybe if we settle down or we go to some other place, it might change. So this is also, you need to be aware and appreciate this person for their individuality, not part of the co-living, right?
Exactly, yeah. And like for us, when me and my partner first met, we were in a co-living environment. We didn't date so much later, so it was a slightly different start for us, but we met in this group environment. It was great. Everything was really fun. Like, it was easy. As our relationship progressed and we continued to nomad, we realized that at certain points there's different constraints on both of our lives and different needs in both of our lives that we need to consider. And so I actually went from like full-time nomad, where I was traveling super fast. Like when I think like 2017 up until 2019, I'd be like a different country every month. Like I was really just like bouncing around the world. And now I have a home base. And now this is the first co-living experience truly that I've been in. I did a pop-up co-working retreat last year in the fall. And the last sort of like authentic digital nomad co-living community I've been a part of before this was almost 2 years ago at this point. And I've done, you know, informal co-livings with friends, but like to be back in this environment, it's sort of this like interesting observation around like, how do I plan my time in my life, and what does that look like now that we have a base? And so yeah, as you evolve as a person, as you evolve in a couple, like different people have different needs, and to talk about those things really open is like, I think, the key to the success of it all. But I think all of these questions, whether you're in a relationship, whether you're single, are just really important for nomads to ask themselves. Like, what does it mean to have a base? How do you want your life to look? How do you want to spend your time? What's the balance of being in co-livings versus doing things informally versus having time to recharge and just getting an Airbnb? We have the luxury of making so many decisions, but I think the happiest and like most sustainable nomadic lifestyles come from having intentionality around why you make the decision to stay in a co-living versus just grabbing an Airbnb somewhere interesting for a month or two. Instead of just letting the decisions happen to you, make the decisions.
Yeah, and talk about the decisions about everything as soon as you can, right?
Yeah.
Because this is a big part of the relationship, traveling, and what you said. What if one partner wants to like settle down and build a base in a place? And what if you don't think about this place, or like, yeah, talk about these things is very important, I think. And going back to Colivings,
Okay.
you are doing some research about them. Can
Yeah.
you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so the research came from, again, it's funny, like I like to think of myself as like a very optimistic person, but my most like creative journeys happen when I have certain like negative emotions or pain points in my life. And so a couple of years ago, I was going to be part of a co-workation program, and that's a word that's now getting thrown out a lot along with co-livings. And I found that the expectations versus the reality of this experience didn't match up. And I thought to myself, well, like, how could this happen? Like, I asked my questions that I normally ask. I looked through the communication that they shared, and I felt like I wanted to opt in to this community. And then I felt let down. And in that experience, I realized that while at this point in my life, maybe I haven't been to as many co-livings as people that have just started their journey and are doing it full time, since I do now have a base, I have the historical knowledge of how this ecosystem has evolved. And I learned that there's certain words that we called ourselves because there weren't better words to use that are now very trendy, and people are using them for branding and marketing, co-living being one of them. And co-living to us means something very different than co-living to a real estate agent that has a bunch of accommodations and wants to make it attractive for a certain clientele, like the remote worker, because it's very trendy, it's very interesting, like it's a cool, attractive market to be part of. And so my desire to do the research was, why are people using all these same terms when there's no standard definitions? And what are people actually looking for when they decide to participate in this sort of ecosystem, is what I called it in my research. And so I did a series of user interviews, a series of interviews. I went back to my own reflections of, the like 15 different co-livings I had been to up to that point. And I started to clarify, what are the different definitions that exist in this ecosystem? Why is a pop-up co-living different than a digital nomad co-living that's different from a digital nomad retreat, for example? Like, why are those things different? What should you expect in each of those? And then I took the research a step further and said, well, what are the value sets that would make someone succeed or feel comfortable or happy with their experience in one versus the other? And I found that there were three big levers. And so one was this idea of like novelty versus routine. And I think people that are novelty seeking tend to want to go to these, destination co-livings, these digital nomad co-livings, where they can go to different experiences, different cultures, different places, and they're getting this novelty. Versus someone who seeks routine might want like a standardized brand and a standardized experience everywhere they go. I also realized, and this goes back to the introverted extroverted question, that like some people are very community oriented and some people are very privacy oriented. And I think that becomes the difference then of whether you're introverted or extroverted. If you're community oriented, you would succeed in a co-living, versus if you're more privacy oriented, maybe you would succeed more in just going to a digital nomad hub, having your own private apartment and partaking in co-working activities and social activities in places like Buenos Aires, Lisbon, Bansko, Chiang Mai come to mind for like that type of experience. And then finally, is it truly the place or is it an experience itself? So I found as I was researching this that like you can think of co-living solely as the place. We're in Burgess right now and we're in this physical space, but there's also experiences to be had. So the idea of co-working together as an experience is place agnostic. So having a group of friends that you meet up with once a year in a different location, and it's always the same kind of group, and you get your own house and you have your own social activities, becomes an experience-based digital nomad activity. And so I really wanted to break down, when do you need a physical place and how does that impact what people expect. So it's very early days. I started this research in the fall while I was doing a program in Croatia. And since then, I've gotten more and more into design experience. I took a certification course earlier this year, and now through the lens of experience design, I'm going back through the research to say, like, how can you map out an experience for a co-living versus a workation versus informal, friends meeting up, hopefully trying to provide more sort of like question and answers of how to approach helping people make those decisions.
Oh, wow.
So more to come. That was very long, sorry.
No. And maybe you will post the results on these insights on your LinkedIn.
Yeah, so there's a post from a few months ago of my very first attempt at drawing out the ecosystem, which I can send to you to share
Absolutely.
with all of y'all listening. And hopefully we'll see a V2 version of that ecosystem soon.
Nice.
Yeah.
And I wanted to finish by asking you, what does coliving mean to you?
Yes, finally this question. I keep saying you need clear definitions.
But okay, give us one.
But I haven't said it yet. Okay. So to me, co-living can be defined as an experience with a shared accommodation, but you can't stop there, and that's where most people stop, where the intention is to build community around people that have the flexibility to be location independent and to work together. And so I actually wrote down a definition that will be more eloquent, so I can read it from my research. A shared living experience, potentially in a specific place, designed for remote workers, that offers the accommodation, the dedicated workspace, and ample communal areas. And this is the important part to me, with the clear intention of bringing people together to share ideas, conversations, skill shares, and lived social experiences with other guests. So that would be the definition that
Amazing. Let's go edit Wikipedia right now. We put it there. Yeah, I totally subscribe your words. So that's a good definition.
Thank you.
Wow, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for
Thank
being
you.
part of this episode. Thanks, Melon, to sponsor this episode as well. And yeah, Ali, we will follow you on your journey of this research and these other projects that you have in mind.
Awesome. And if anyone wants to be involved in the research, it's very unclear right now, but I'm always happy to have some chats or exchange a few messages with people interested in talking about sort of the next generation of co-living.
Absolutely. That sounds amazing. Well, thank you, Ali, so much. And this has been another episode of Colivers Club. Bye.
Bye.